Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
So good evening, everyone. It is 6:30 on June 12th, 2025, and this is the monthly meeting of Fitchburg's Transportation and Transit Commission. I'll call the meeting to order and note for the secretary that all commissioners are here except for Alder Gerhardt, who is traveling and absent with an excuse. There are no members of the public on Zoom or in the room, so we'll go on to approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion. I'll move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
So Rick and Elizabeth, thank you. Any changes, errors, etc.? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of approving as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will use this agenda. Next up is the approval of minutes from our March 8th meeting, May 8th meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Rick. Is there a second? Thank you, Maggie. Are there any errors or omissions that people want to take a note of? Seeing none, all in favor?
Well, I don't know if it's necessary. There is no second for Gabby's nomination. I don't know if there needs to be one, especially because it was approved unanimously, but.
I don't believe we need seconds for nominations for officers.
Okay. Well, it would be new to me, but I'm good with it. Anything else? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, those are approved. Next up are three discussion, staff report.
So Sign, I'll start off with Sign Road and then get into some other stuff. That project has been kind of on a pause, as I'm sure people who are in the neighborhood have kind of seen, but we're supposed to get back started working on that next week, both on phase 2 and phase 3. The paths adjacent to that project are all closed, both to pedestrian, bike, and as always, close to car traffic, but we have seen some cars on those paths. So if anyone is in the area and happens to get a license plate of any cars driving on the paths, send it my way. I would love to have that information.
What are the reasons for the pause?
So phase 3 is a contractual and geotechnical issue. Basically, that's through the marsh that intersection. And we needed to modify how we were constructing the subgrade for that road through there. That caused a bit of a contractual issue. Rock Road pulled off the project, that's the contractor. And we had to go through a whole WISDOT change order process. That took about, I think by the time they get back, it'll be 7 weeks.
Yikes.
Yeah. And phase 2, we've been dealing with utility, like MG&E and TDS issues, them moving their existing infrastructure out of the way of our new infrastructure. Before these projects, those utilities have to submit work plans to the city. They submitted those work plans and they identified a bunch of conflicts with our proposed infrastructure. They made all of those changes, but there have been several more conflicts that were not identified. Yeah.
Jeez.
So, a lot of that has been, it just seems like when they do their work plans, they don't really look at vertical depths, they just look at horizontal stuff. So then when two lines, cross at 90 degrees and they should be able to go above or below each other, but they just happen to be at the same depth, and MG&E gas is pretty good, but the electrical and fiber optic utilities don't always know how deep their lines are because they just drill them and they're in where they drilled them.
And you can't tell from the locators.
You can tell a very, very broad range, like this is between 3 and 5 feet, or this is 10 feet deep, or
because of the strength
like
of the signal?
Yeah, basically.
Wow. Well, good luck with that.
So
does that push the project completion date back a little bit? I mean, phase 3 was already kind of earlier originally, so 7 weeks, does that kind of push everything back to September?
Yes, that'll be on a future change order. I expect that phase 3 that had an August 30th or 29th completion date, I would expect that to be at least end of September now, if not later. And then we'll only be looking at about 4 or 5 extra days on the end of the phase 2 contract, which that was scheduled for September 19th. So it'll be September 26th, I believe.
Okay.
So, and that 5 days is working days. So.
I'm a big fan of your weekly updates. Read them religiously.
Thank you.
But this was not mentioned. I did pick up the hard barriers being put up, and I figured that was due to violations. It might be good for people who are following the project to mention that there have been geotechnical issues, and that the project will last longer than expected.
So once we have actually signed a change order that says what that end date will be, then we'll publicize
Very good.
that.
Okay, that makes sense.
So one last question, I apologize. Given that this will be, kind of a 7-week addition, especially on that the phase 3, does that, I feel like I remember in other instances, if it goes past a certain date, the contractor has to pay because they didn't get the work done on time. But because of this being kind of outside of their control, or, I'm curious if we expect a big check at the end because this took 7 extra weeks.
So basically, if a contract goes past the either substantial completion date or final completion date, and there's different requirements for each of those, that's when the contractor would incur those liquidated damages that you're talking about, where they would have to basically take somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $2,500 off of the contract per day. So basically the city gets that money back. In this case, we would be signing a change order to modify the substantial completion date and the final completion date to push it further out. So the contractor would not be incurring those liquidated damages.
Okay.
So
Do
if
you
they
have
go
any
past,
recourse against the utilities that caused the problem?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
That's a thing in state law, basically.
They can ride roughshod over us.
It's a constant frustration with any municipal engineer I talk to. So yeah, anything else on Sain? All right. So onto the bike and ped plan, that's progressing. The draft of that will be discussed at the August Bike and Ped Commission meeting, and then the final plan will come to commissions in October, and admin and elected officials are basically going to determine which commissions that goes to. It'll obviously go to Bike and Ped and Common Council, but if there are any others, that'll be determined by admin and elected officials.
Bike Fitchburg has requested at the Bike and Ped Committee that we at least see an outline of what the consultant is working on so that we can comment earlier while changes are still possible. You know, looking at maybe missing sections and that kind of stuff. So the Bike and Ped staff was going to pass that request along. I have not heard back.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that either. So then my next thing, if there's no other questions on the Bike and Ped plan, I just kind of wanted to go through basically a brief summary of some of the analysis that Public Works and I do when we have like requests about dangerous intersection or speeding or stuff like that, or this intersection should really be a traffic signal or whatever it happens to be. Because I feel like, and some of my colleagues at Public Works feel like lately we've gotten a lot of requests from residents who maybe don't realize how much time and effort it takes to put an analysis like this together. So for the Seminole and Schumann intersection, which I can pull up quickly. This thing is on the top of my screen. So for anyone not familiar, that's Osmondson. This is the intersection we're talking about. So we've got the Seminole Pool in the northeast corner. We've got a lot of businesses on the west side, and then the east side is mostly residential. Right now, one of the big issues that I get complaints about is this offset, it's actually a kind of not offset turn lane, where the turn lane is on the other side of this pedestrian island. So at night it can feel like you're like sitting in oncoming traffic because you're so close to the through lane here. And then pedestrians can also kind of get confused because usually with an island, you navigate one direction of traffic, you look one way, you get to the island, then you can look the other way. But here, it's still the same direction of traffic, just with the turn lane. So, and obviously the other side, the southbound side, is a little bit different. So it's not even consistent across both legs of the intersection. This is also two-way stop control, so Schumann stops, Seminole does not. And then up here to the north of the intersection, but it kind of plays in, Seminole goes from 2 lanes in each direction down to 1 lane in each direction.
The lane and the left turn lane.
Yeah, so, yeah. So then I'll kind of go through the analysis I do. So first we start with crashes. Basically the UW-Madison, they have a division that conglomerates all of the crash data from every police department in the state. I have access to that, and this is kind of a summary of the crashes at this intersection in the past 10 years, I believe. So there have been 6. 2 of them are merging 2 cars into 1 lane, sideswipe collisions.
And those would be southbound, right?
Both of those were southbound, yes. Because northbound it turns into 2 lanes, so you won't really have that interaction. Yeah. 2 of them were kind of T-bone or angle crashes, so people stopped at the stop signs on Schumann and then pulled out in front of traffic that was not going to stop on Seminole Highway. And then 2 of them were people turning. I think one was someone turning, one was someone who was going straight, and they hit the signs in the median. So honestly, when I look at this, I'm not super concerned about these hitting the median signs. You know, they're designed, yeah, it happens all the time. These medians are there to protect pedestrians. Obviously, I'd rather people not drive into them, but we're not gonna take the medians out, because that'd be more dangerous for pedestrians. These 2 into 1 lane merge situations I'll get into in a second, but they're not super related to the intersection in this case. They're pretty far north. And then these T-bone crashes are really the ones that are more concerning, because that's one of the most dangerous types of crashes you can get besides head-on, obviously. So I pulled those off of the TopSlab website. Then I have a new tool that I think I've talked with some of you about, but maybe not shown you. This is Streetlight. This is a basically data aggregation tool that I wish it would zoom out a little bit more. But basically, this looks at smart vehicle data. If you've got a navigation system or something like that in your car.
Or even a cell phone, right?
So they can't use cell phones anymore. I think before 2022 or 2021, they could use cell phone data, and then there was a federal law change where they could not use that data anymore. So basically, I can run an analysis on this intersection, and this software will tell me how many cars use the intersection and which ways they're turning and which ways they're going. So from the north, you can see total, we've got about 2,800 vehicles. This is per day. From the south, about the same, 2,700. From the east and west, about 250. And then, you know, the turning movements are also important to look at, but I don't think we need to get that far into this data. So based on this data, I can do a signal warrant analysis, which I sent this to the mayor and to our administrator, who were the ones kind of inquiring about a traffic signal at this location. This analysis is opening up. So basically in the manual for uniform traffic control devices, which is a big textbook basically that says what you can and can't do with signs and pavement markings and traffic signals and stuff like that in your roadways. They've got what are called warrants for putting up a traffic signal. So basically you can put up a traffic signal whenever you kind of feel like it as a city engineer. But they obviously cost a lot of money, so you want to make sure you're justified when you make that decision. And those warrants serve as kind of a set of justifications. So these warrants, they include 8-hour vehicle volume. So basically, over a period of 8 hours, the traffic on both the major road and the minor road has to reach a certain threshold. That's this table right here. And then this table is basically saying that only in 1 hour in 24 does this intersection meet criteria B, which is this 525 vehicles on the major road and 53 vehicles on the minor road. So you have to meet it in all 8 hours. We only meet it in 1, so that warrant isn't justified. 4-hour vehicle volume, basically the same thing, just with different numbers of vehicles over 4 hours. This one they use this little chart, kind of same thing, 1 hour we meet it. These other 3 were below the line, so we do not meet this warrant either. Peak hour, basically the same. You can see that we're under it, just for 1 hour. Pedestrian volume, same thing, you just do pedestrian volume. We're pretty far under on that one as well.
We have good data for pedestrians.
So these are based on estimates at 3 other locations on Seminole Highway. And then I also added a percentage increase because it's right next to the Seminole Pool. But really the traffic crossing the road, it's businesses on one side and residents on the other. So crossing Seminole Highway, I didn't figure there would really be that much pedestrian traffic because of the pool. But I did add, I think, 25% to those other estimates just because we didn't actually collect this pedestrian data. It's not near school, so we don't meet warrant 5. It's not part of a coordinated signal system, so we don't meet warrant 6. Crashes, again, looked at the crashes. This is a 3-year period for this warrant, and none of those angle crashes were in that 3-year period, so it does not meet this warrant. And then these other warrants are kind of more specialty things, so we don't really look at those. But basically, we don't meet any of the warrants at this intersection, so it would be really difficult to justify putting a signal in. So, without putting in a signal, elected officials and administration were still interested in some sort of redesign of this intersection for the CIP. So this is what we came up with. So, since one of those issues we have is this offset, or it's not offset turn lane, this design has the turn lanes in a more kind of normal configuration. So the pedestrian island is this kind of purplish blob, and then the turn lane you can see is moved over into where that pedestrian island is right now. Another issue is the way this path kind of crosses the road. If you're stopped at this stop bar, you can't really see people coming up on this path because it's kind of behind you. You have to look out your back window. So sweeping this path up earlier, basically, will basically get bikers and walkers into the view of the person sitting at that stop sign. So hopefully we prevent any of those type of crashes. Then the other thing, we do have this pool, and we are a little bit worried about pedestrians crossing here. So we would add an RFB at the north leg.
The big thing about pool traffic is it's swim meets. Mm-hmm. And then people park all through the business park and walk over there.
Mm-hmm. And so speaking of the swim meets, when there are swim meets, there's also cars parked all along this section of Schumann, and then people getting in and out of their cars, walking across the street. So cars turning off of Seminole onto Schumann might have to brake more suddenly because there's people in the street that can't see around those parked cars, basically. So this also adds a sidewalk across the front of the Seminole Pool property that I blocked with this text box. So it would get to this driveway, so people would have somewhere to walk, not in the street.
Like Fitchburg has designated the frontage of the Seminole Pool property as an important place for a multi-use path, because there's multi-use path network across the street, and if you could zoom out a little bit, that multi-use path that you see going on the east, mm-hmm. runs into Seminole Glen Park and swings around to the school path. And so we were thinking that that was an important connection to make in the bike network. So you will have to move that berm that's already there. But if you were to undertake that project, we would ask that that be a multi-use path.
Fair enough. That's a good point. once we actually get into design. If this gets added
If
to
ever
the CIP
this happens,
and
yeah.
we go into design, that's something we would definitely do. This is kind of an estimate level design. And then the last thing is I made these concrete islands much, much, much bigger. So they're not just these small islands that people can kind of run over. These would be full height curb, which if you've seen these islands now, they're not really full height curb. They're really easy to roll up on.
They're
with a car
mountable.
tire. Yeah. So these would be a lot higher, a lot more visible, and hopefully protect pedestrians a lot more.
Any no parking around the intersection?
We could do that. That doesn't really fall into making an estimate,
Sure.
construction estimate for
Yep,
this, so didn't really.
Yellow
include that.
paint's cheap, yeah.
Yep. And then we get into the estimate. So this is kind of a CIP planning level cost estimate. That is not opening. There it is. So here you can see I go through quantity of curb and gutter, concrete island, all this stuff. I have unit prices from previous contracts that we've done. If this project's for a future year, I add in a bunch of inflation to make sure we have enough money. An RFB system like this costs about 20 grand. So for what I just showed you, I'm estimating this would cost $350,000. It's obviously a lot of money for an intersection that has had 6 crashes, none of them involving pedestrians or bikes in the last 10 years. So yeah, that's kind of what we go through. This takes me about a week when considering my other workload, probably 5 or 6 hours total of work on this. And this is just for one intersection that may or may not be added to the CIP.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But elected officials want to know.
Exactly. It's part of my job, so.
Do you just make up the design based on like what the concerns are?
Yes, more or less. I mean, I consult.
He's a trained engineer.
Yes,
Yeah.
based on tons of knowledge that was
I consult, textbooks and NACDO and FHWA.
Design guides.
Yep, for a lot of best practices. But yeah, it's just this one. I mean, they run over the medians, make the medians bigger.
Median
the
on the
other
wrong
thing
side, change the median to the right side.
The other thing I didn't mention was those merging crashes. That was a very easy fix, hopefully. We just added more signs saying that there's a merge coming up because the existing signage was not at the appropriate distance from the intersection according to the MUTCD. So we added more at the appropriate distance.
Can you go back to one of the maps?
Like the bigger map?
Very first one, or not that one? This is just maybe Google Maps, yeah, and just zoom out a little bit. Is there a chance to improve the sight line when you're coming westbound on Schumann to look left down
This corner?
Yeah, because that really is tricky to see.
Yes, that would also probably be part of this or be done beforehand. We've trimmed those trees a bunch of times.
Do they belong to the homeowner or do they belong to the city?
So the city can trim any tree that hangs over into the right of way. We could just cut it straight up at the right of way line.
Yeah.
We don't like to do that because homeowners get very upset.
Yeah.
These trees belong to this homeowner. This homeowner did not know that. He thought they were the HOA's trees because there's an HOA sign right here,
Okay.
which I think is a fair assumption on his part. So he didn't know he was supposed to be maintaining them. And I didn't either. I called the HOA and said, you need to maintain your trees. And they said, no, they're his. So then I called him and he trimmed them pretty quickly, actually. So, but we would, if we're redoing this intersection completely, we would look at more stuff there.
But even regardless of whether that got approved in a future capital budget or not, could the regular maintenance of that sight line be something that just happened? I mean, and I think they're more grown out right now because it's June, but it's a little little tricky to see until you get your nose out there, and then you're almost in the.
Yeah, it's something that's on our streets crews radar now. So
It is a two-edged sword, because one of the things about low sight distances, and I'm thinking now about the intersection down here between Kinsale Place and the patio furniture building, is that if people can't see, then they stop. And so it helps with stop compliance. Now, if there's no chance of seeing until you even pull out, then that's a problem, I agree.
which when this is overgrown, it's more like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah, any other questions on that?
Why do you only put the rectangular flashing beacons on the one side of the crosswalk?
Because they're expensive, and that's the side of the street I would expect to have more pedestrian traffic.
Head traffic there.
Yes. So, yeah, that's that one, and then another one that's thankfully very quick. So Irish and Cyan is another one that we get complaints about. And I thought the maps and streetlight were gonna be better, but because I have a small screen there, being weird. So that's here. So this intersection, Irish Lane is a two-way stop. Irish Lane is a two-way stop, and Cyan is a through street. And if you've ever stopped, if you've ever driven through on Cyan, you'll know it feels a little weird to just go through that intersection without stopping.
Yes.
And kind of same thing for Irish. You stop and then realize that through traffic doesn't stop, and that feels a little weird as well. So with streetlight, it's really easy for me to do this analysis instead of spending 4 weeks with radars out there, because I'd have to do 2 weeks on each street basically. We can see that Irish Lane here has 1,500 vehicles per day, and South Cyan at this location has about 600 vehicles per day. Generally, in a two-way stop configuration, you put your stop signs on the minor road. In this case, the stop signs are on Irish Lane, which I think if you look at the city in general, seems like more of a minor road than Cyan, but at this intersection, that's not the case.
There's not that many destinations south that people need to get to.
Yep, and if you look at this, I also have another analysis on this intersection that shows the south leg and the north leg of Cyan. There's like 35 cars a day going north through this intersection. There's about 500 going south, but basically nobody's going north through this.
Do you know how many are turning? I feel like a lot of the Irish traffic turns north on Cyan versus going straight.
So that's this other analysis. So on Irish, coming from the west, it's split about evenly for traffic turning left, which is north, and through traffic, it's about 200 cars each. And then from the east, it's basically everybody's going through, which is interesting. I think it's just people coming off of MM and wanting to go to Fish, basically.
So this, for people living in central Fitchburg like I do, this is the way to get to McFarland and Stoughton.
And 90.
And 90, everybody comes down South Cyan or Fish Hatchery and then heads over and gets on B. So that I think is a major interesting destination on the east end of Irish.
Yeah. So this analysis, pretty easy for me to tell what to do. We can either switch the two-way stop to Cyan, and that will most likely improve traffic dramatically here, and let everyone who's going through on Irish just go through. Or since we have a lot of complaints about the amount of traffic on Irish already, we can turn this into a four-way stop, which is completely warranted here. So that's what we're looking at doing at this location.
When you have this data from Streetlight and it's only representing people who have, drivers who have satellite navigation and not cell phones in their car, do the numbers somehow represent all the cars? Like,
Yes.
Do they have some statistics about what percentage of cars are
They do.
reporting?
So they basically use their data set, which like you said only includes cars with like satellite navigation, OnStar, all that kind of stuff. And then they run actual physical analyses that count every single car.
Okay.
Like the radar counters that I have, or road tubes, or cameras, or something like that. And then they say, okay, we got this many cars with our data collection, we got this many cars with the radar counter. It's 1.3 times more with the radar counters, so we'll just multiply by that and get a good approximation of the real number of cars.
They do this calibration, and then they go out and validate it against places that post facto validation of estimates with new on the ground counts.
Sure.
And I've done this myself too with a couple of streets. You're between like 1,000 and 5,000 cars a day, then your accuracy is generally like between like 1,000 or 100 cars over under the real amount. And then your accuracy gets worse as you get less cars, just because it's more random whether they're equipped with the sat nav or not. Sure. You know, in smaller sample sizes. So.
And the numbers we're looking at here represent a day or a week?
This is a day.
1 day.
Yep.
And it's a weekday average.
Yep, this is all days. This is Monday through Sunday.
But an average over those.
Or is this just rush hour? Because you have 6 to 10 and then 3 to 7.
So this I have set to all day right now. But I could select one of these if I wanted to. Okay. So. But yeah.
So from a decision-making standpoint about whether to, we have the data that says, yeah, this would be warranted for some stop control. How, what then goes into the thought process of whether we switch the stop signs to cyan and let Irish go through, or a 4-way stop? Like, I'm thinking, if you're already used to stopping, would people then not, be used to stopping and then somebody rear ends because they're trying, and then does that cause more issues? Is it easier to just make everybody stop, for example?
Yeah, so the reason for switching from Irish being the stop street to cyan being the stop street, and Irish going through, would be if we're concerned about backups on Irish. So then we don't want to make people stop, we just want to let them go through. Switching to a 4-way stop adds about 10, this is off the top of my head, 10 seconds of delay per vehicle at the intersection. So if we're not concerned about delay, then we can switch it to a 4-way stop. And at this location, I'm honestly not concerned about the delay because, like you said, Irish already stops, and nobody really complains about the delay on Irish.
It's less of a change.
Yeah.
To make it a 4-way than to switch.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even so, if we've got some of those flashing stop signs, it would be good to install those initially.
Yeah, usually when we put up a new stop sign, we add those orange flags on it. We have talked about the flashing stop signs here. Before I did this analysis, we thought, well, why don't we just make those, the ones on Irish, flashing stop signs? But it turns out the reason that people probably blow through the stop sign is because there's a lot more traffic on Irish than on cyan. So people are doing what feels right at the intersection.
Yeah. They never see any cross traffic.
Exactly. So that's my staff report.
I think that was very valuable to orient commissioners to the process that these complaints can evoke. And as we go into Vision Zero, we might be doing a lot of this kind of analysis instead of just complaint driven, hopefully proactively. Yep. But it's important to know what kind of resources get sucked up in this kind of analysis, and it's not something we can undertake lightly.
I agree, and I was also gonna suggest, Ross, I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot and putting FACTv on the spot here. I feel like this would be a great opportunity to have kind of a standalone presentation with FACTv about exactly what we just went through. I think of like what Chris Leitz does with the assessments every year, it kind of breaking down and demystifying all the opening the black box, if you will. So I think this would be a great example and a great presentation to kind of broaden out. I'm certainly planning to share the recording of this meeting now in my newsletter. So
I think that is a good idea. I will talk with FACTv about that.
With regard to the Irish site analysis, what does happen next?
So I have a monthly traffic and safety meeting with the police department, other members of Public Works, and Chad Brecklin, our city administrator. That's next week, I believe. We're going to talk about this then and make a decision.
Okay.
And then this will be an ordinance change?
No, this
Because our stop signs and yield signs are enumerated in the ordinances.
They are, but we are looking to kind of eliminate that part of the ordinance because by
We also talked about parking.
Right, by state law, the signs are the thing that actually controls the law. You know, if there's a stop sign, you have to stop, whether it's in our ordinance or not.
Yeah.
So that's another thing we're going to talk about at that traffic and safety meeting is what the timeline is for that change.
Whether you should make that ordinance change or this little atomic ordinance change.
So.
Is the crash data publicly available?
The number and type of crashes are available, but the actual police reports are not publicly available because they have people's personal information and addresses and stuff in them.
I just think if you do I think that's a good idea. I feel like letting people be like, you can look for yourself how bad this. I know the other stuff isn't, but that might be useful if we can tell people where they can look it up themselves to see how bad it actually is.
Any other questions for staff? All right, let's tackle our discussion items. Number one is the public transit plan. Ross, kick this off.
So I shared an email with everyone that had a link to the shared version of the transit plan that everyone could comment on. I know Logan did. I'm not sure about other people.
I put some in today. I was wondering, I tried to remember to put my initials or name on all my comments because I'm a guest user, and I'm wondering how one logs in if I don't have a City Hall login. I assume that's why Logan was able to log in.
I think you just log in if you have a Microsoft account.
Okay.
And if you have a Gmail account, I think you can use that.
Well, I am logged in on this computer to my Microsoft and my Gmail accounts, but that wasn't enough.
Okay. Well,
So I don't know what else I have to do.
then
Oh, well, there is a sign in up here. Let's click on that button. Okay, it's a City of Fitchburg sign in. So can I use the same sign in I use for Request Tracker?
that's a good question. I don't know.
It's offering me, my computer's offering me my old FitchburgWI.gov login. I'm sure that won't work. All right, that's for further research. Everybody, if you just put your initials on your comment, that should help Ross figure out who was the contributor.
Yeah. So I think we can just go through these comments, and if anyone has anything else to add that's not in here, we can discuss that too. I think we're not going to be able to spend a ton of time on any one of these comments. There's 43 of them, but we'll do our best. best. So Logan, you want to kick us off since you're the first one?
Sure, and I'll preface by saying I don't think we need to go through 43 also, because I put some in about, just be consistent about the number versus,
Those ones we can skip.
What page is the first comment on?
The second page, right after or third page, it's right after the couple of title sheets.
Right in the introduction. So my thought here was, we have in the first paragraph of the introduction, we talk about wanting to provide the choice of modes, and then also that this is a way to help reduce fuel consumption and our city's carbon footprint, which I believe does this link to an ordinance or a resolution? Yes, okay. So my thought was, I don't know if we have resolutions or anything that we want to link to, or if we want to reference other plans, but I feel like it would be worth adding something here that also talks about, as we're growing, it helps to minimize the impact of the growth. Fewer vehicles on the road than we have per capita right now, and also connecting folks with city services and employment opportunities. I think of the discussions we've had in this room about extending all-day bus service, specifically to help serve the City Hall campus with the senior center and the library as well. So those are a little bit more kind of values driven rather than, but I thought that if we were going to have the language about the carbon footprint and global climate change goals, that might also be worth kind of adding from the outset.
I agree. I will make that change. Next one, I think that's in. Oh, I skipped a few pages. So, any other comments kind of on this intro page? Okay. Then, kind of on these goals, I think most of these goals are still things we want to work towards, and they're stuff that's in the comprehensive plan. So in this version of the transit plan, we should keep all of these because the comprehensive plan has not been changed yet. But I think the first comment here is this one about the Regional Transit Authority.
I think that we need to keep that in there because the city should be strongly advocating for it. The county is, our other peer municipalities are all over the state. So, and it could happen. There are Republicans in the Fox Valley that see the value. So, and Fair Maps is helping minority party members pay a little bit more attention to their constituents, a little bit less to their leadership, and I think that's a great thing.
Agreed. And the reason that I had put that in there was kind of as stated in the comment, just is it worth having it if it's something that is currently not allowed under state law?
I think the city's support for it would be to advocate for changing state law. And it is in our comprehensive plan, I believe. So
yeah, along with commuter rail. so they're in there.
All right.
That's mine, and I note that. So we're talking about parking management. The only thing that's in there is park and rides, and another kind of parking management is managing curb space. And parking reformers argue that there should be a couple of free spaces on every block, and you should manage to try to, 85% occupancy. Now, we don't have a lot of street parking in Fitchburg, but in Hatchery Hill and across the street at Kinsale Place and up at Terra Vesa, where we have urban commercial form, we have already installed 2-hour parking limits up in Terra Vesa. That's the first step, and then if it's still fully parked up all the time, then you go to parking meters and you put a price that will, so that there's always a couple of free spaces on a block. And paying for parking on the public streets is not something that we do right now, but in the future, as we get more of our mixed-use neighborhoods, it's, I think, in our future. So I don't know if there's another place that we can get this policy in without changing comp plan.
Yep. The next one, I'll update the years, Logan. Next one is kind of a broad thing that I comment on a couple times, but our three main goals for the transit plan are to reduce single occupancy vehicle miles traveled in Fitchburg, provide mobility to those who don't drive, and then improve intra-city transit service. So the form this goal has kind of taken in the rest of the plan, and then in TTC's previous, like a couple years ago, TTC's previous actions, is some sort of shuttle or service to the senior center has been kind of the main goal for this improved intra-city transit service. In my mind, that shuttle service to the senior center is really infeasible for a city of Fitchburg's size and geographic scale. So I don't think we should remove this goal, because I think you could kind of reorient it to mean like bus service within the city to other places besides the senior center. But I think it's worth kind of reconsidering it as we talk about it in the rest of this plan. Yeah.
I have always been a big hater of the buy a bus and shuttle people to the senior center strategy for solving this problem. When I was on TTC before and as elected official, I always advocated for making sure that transit came to the civic center. And we are talking about connecting the 65 and the 75 and the B. And one of the key things that I think we need to do is make sure that there's a stop here. And I would argue to keep this goal, and that when we get toward to talking about it, that we should be using fixed route and not some kind of demand thing, which is what people gravitate to. But the size of Fitchburg, I'm talking about the population size, when we had a consultant do a comparative study of near fixed route and shared ride taxi and fixed route, the conclusion was you could start with one of these two lower levels of service, the flexible curb to curb or fixed routes that are allowed to deviate. But as you scale up, those things become not cost effective and you end up with fixed route. And we already have fixed route. So I think that improving fixed route is the way to go.
I'm not sure I understood how what you just said applies to the goals that we're looking at here. So if I just read goal 2 and 3, and you gave the example of the senior center, to me the 2 and 3 say the same thing then, using the senior center as an example.
So I think to clarify, when I made the comment on here, I just realized it reading it in this meeting, that I was saying remove the senior center stuff, and that's not stated in that goal.
Oh,
so that's yeah.
Okay. Another way we meet goal 2 is to expand paratransit.
Right.
And so
all-day fixed route service.
And another way we do it is by having more B-cycle stations. So there are a number of other ways to meet that goal besides the shuttle thing that people have talked about.
Right. What I'm missing at the high level though is the distinction between 2 and 3, and we can have details under each of the goals, but why do we have goal 2 stated the way that it is and goal 3 stated the way that it is, given the examples that I've heard so far?
Maybe because number 3 also applies to choice riders.
Yeah, because the steps under 3 are like advertise bus service more, be more thoughtful about drop-off and pick-off locations, stuff like that. So it seems like that goes well beyond people who can't drive.
Okay.
And just goes to people who want to take the bus,
That's
or
fair.
could take the bus regardless.
One of the things that has held transit back historically from acceptance of public funding is the idea that transit is a social service and not transportation for everybody.
Okay.
So.
And to that point, Rick, I look at, to the comment about, personal, like, I have a vehicle, so I don't have to take the bus, but I choose to. That kind of 1 and 3 would overlap in like my typical use case of taking the bus to work too, because it helps reduce that single occupancy vehicle miles traveled. And, I could take the bus here and not have to walk 2 miles home if I took the bus to our TTC meeting. So there's some overlap, and I'll just say that's, I think that works for me. So.
Next thing is,
I made that comment, sorry, I
so.
didn't realize I needed to say that, and it ties into my other agenda item there, that I didn't understand when we look at this, why we've chosen to use the word single occupancy vehicle. If we're interested in reducing the miles traveled of vehicles, then why not personal vehicles? And I guess I would also ask the question about how one measures that. And if we're a growing city, I don't understand how goal 1 would be achieved. if it's per capita or per household or something like that, then I can see that as a goal. But I don't understand how you would say in a growing city you're going to set a goal of reducing the single occupancy or personal vehicle miles traveled within and through Fitchburg.
Well, New York City, they're shooting for
I
understand. They're shooting for
Is
absolute,
the
but
example.
we could certainly try to reduce it per capita.
Yes, then make that the goal. Make it like, I don't understand.
You don't
how
want to
you're
have a
going to
congestion
measure it
mitigation
anyways.
zone at Hatchery Hill.
Let's do that. At least for the people that have the satellite where we can find a way to charge them when they drive into it. So, go ahead.
I do think that the vehicle miles traveled reduction is in the sustainability plan, despite the growth, saying we need to do more than just be flat. I mean, which we do for climate and all the other things. We have to do more than just have a flat VMT. We have to figure out how to offset the growth and reduce. So I still think, I know it's a big goal, but I still think that should be our sort of North Star, is that we reduce VMT under what we have now, even as we grow. And I think that's consistent with all the other plans, like the sustainability plan, the COP plan, and
You're right that the sustainability plan does not have the per capita item, because that was a big discussion that we had amongst staff. Like, this seems impossible, but it's a goal.
but also necessary if we're gonna be real about climate change.
So, thoughts on per capita or not per capita in this plan?
Leave it up, is my feeling. I agree with Elizabeth.
I think I did just have a discussion about other plans and like how being consistent with our goals between these plans is very valuable, because it allows us to work together between departments and staff and not like have competing efforts here,
So this is a draft of a plan from 2025 to 2030. And we have an existing plan in place that was from 2020 to 2025, right?
2022 to 2027.
Okay, so we're sort of overlapping.
Yeah.
So what are our single occupancy vehicle miles traveled in Fitchburg for last year, 2024?
I do not know that off the top of my head, but it is in the sustainability plan.
Where would we get that data?
So I could pay, so Phil, who does the sustainability plan, has a source for it. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
Okay.
I could also pay Streetlight more money and get it from Streetlight.
How would Streetlight know whether there's one person or more than one person in a vehicle?
They would be giving me
VMT.
not single
Right,
occupancy.
so then why would we have the goal of single occupancy when we don't have a way to measure it?
Maybe the way that we look at this goal is it should align with whatever the actual wording is in the sustainability plan.
And the other thing is that we don't have to be able to measure everything using current technology that we want to change. It sure long-term helps, but if vehicle miles traveled is really a measure of consumption of a lot of different kinds of resources, and it's worth getting it down, and it can be measured, even if we don't have the data.
And there are also other ways of counting it than streetlight, like you can do a physical count, which I don't know if that's how, you'd obviously not be doing that on every car. That
Right.
would be an estimate.
Yeah.
Very, very rough estimate.
Yeah. Anyways, when I read the goal and I thought, okay, I'd like to see what the numbers were since we've had this goal in place for 5 years previous to, us discussing it here.
Yep.
And I don't see anything that says we're making strides toward that goal or moving further away from it or anything else. I just see a goal that makes people feel good.
And part of that's my fault because I was not aware that we had this transit plan after I came in. There wasn't any transition period between me and the last transportation engineer.
Okay.
So I wasn't tracking this, but
Sure.
I will be going forward.
It's in here with the sustainability plan,
Yeah.
it says. I do think though, to your point, like, can't we just say reduce vehicle miles traveled? I mean, do we even have to say personal vehicle? If we're measuring VMT, we wanna reduce VMT, why do we even have to clarify the type of?
Too, so if we're going to just make it vehicles, then we're somehow gonna reduce buses at the same time as.
I think we're okay. I don't think the buses are going to.
Out of
That's
cars
why I
and
said-
buses
That's
is a
why I
good
said
thing.
personal vehicles, sorry, that was my interpretation of what we were trying to achieve there.
But when we measure VMT, you technically measure bus VMT, right? I mean, it's so small
That's a great
proportionally, I really
question.
don't think it,
Yeah.
I really don't think it matters, cause I think it's such a small amount of VMT, but.
Be a great problem if our VMT goes up because we have so many buses on the road.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, like when the Epic user group meets.
And I can just paste a comment in here from the sustainability.
Okay.
That has what our current, or I think 2022 appears to be
Okay.
the last.
We can look at that in the final draft, I think.
We are collecting at our 2 Telram counters heavy vehicles. And I think that buses are distinguished in the finer stuff that you need a login to get.
Yeah, but, so also streetlight, I don't pay them for this, but I could distinguish between different sizes of vehicle, and that would help with like determining what's a passenger vehicle and what's a heavy truck. Like I don't think many of these goals really like pertain to semi-traffic or anything like that, unless you're talking about like
Not in the transit
trains
plan.
or something. Steve, you've got a comment about getting transit to the place where people live, basically.
Right, and we are having a later discussion about removing transit from a neighborhood where this talks about people moving in when transit is already there and therefore being able to live there without a car or a couple having one car. And I think that's a very valid point, but my edit suggests that we should also avoid removing transit from a neighborhood where people have made the decision to live there because there's transit. And we're having that problem with the Johnson development apartments, the Point, and we have a seniors living facility that has asked to has pulled permits to build a facility because there's transit nearby, and that transit's about to be removed. So, and then I
think
wander
that's
off
a
into
valid-
something about B-cycle.
I think that's a valid addition.
As a sub-component of the goal, are you saying once transit is established, never remove it from any neighborhood where transit has been installed?
We do say to the extent possible at the start of this, so
And
give ourselves a out.
Well, it says
and
neighborhoods.
particularly neighborhoods with transit supporting densities.
Well, right, I mean, this basically says do it in new neighborhoods, and it doesn't really say anything about neighborhoods that exist and have transit already servicing them.
Right.
So it's
So
almost like, let's bait and switch, let's give people transit for a while until they move in, and then let's take it away.
That's what we're talking about adding, is saying,
Yeah,
don't take it away.
yeah.
Okay,
Sidewalk projects, yep.
yeah, we can kind of skip that one. These are all, honestly, these kind of comments are just me saying things that don't really need to be added to the plan.
Resistance within current city government and administration. This is their main objection is not that it's not a good idea, but that we don't have the resources to do it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Why is this, what's this heading under convenient? What's that mean? These are convenient things to do?
Yes, make
cost effective.
transit,
Okay, so I agree that it's not convenient.
yeah.
And I agree that, we're gonna talk about TDM in a couple minutes, but, so, I don't think we should remove this. I think this is the direction we should be going.
I agree.
And that we need the resources to do it. It's like the, argument that they had when they did the redesign of the metro system. Said, should we focus on ridership or should we focus on coverage? That's a false choice. You need more resources because both are important. And here, one of the ways you get people out of cars is to give them good alternatives. And TDM is a way to do that.
Yep, I agree. I think we should leave that in. Logan, you've got a comment about rewording the park and ride item?
Yes. So the way it reads to me right now is it makes it sound as if at least one park and ride lot is a done deal and we just need to figure out where we're going to put it. I understand, we want to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and if we put it, okay, let's put it at the far southeast corner by Oregon, and then people are, that cuts down on the traffic on 14. I also want to recognize that there would likely be a significant portion of people who are not Fitchburg residents using this, which is not a bad thing. I'm also cognizant that in a tight budget environment, do we want to be spending money so that somebody from Evansville in Oregon can park in Fitchburg and carpool with their friend up 14? What benefit do we get from Fitchburg to have a few fewer cars on 14 going up Park Street into downtown? So I think that was kind of my main concern with that, is making it seem a little bit as if it's inevitable rather than one possible option on our menu of options to achieve our goals.
Yeah, I wonder if we leave the park and ride feasibility study item and delete the construct park and ride lots, which is next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially because, that's used for how many times a day? I've not gone by the one in Windsor or DeForest or whichever the line is, what side of the Highway 51 it's on, off of Vinburn, outside of very infrequently. So I as we think about sustainability and just, our environment, spending all of this, just all this impervious surface. I really like the goal and the comment you put in here about working with large stores. I don't know how realistic it'll be. Is Walmart gonna, insert big box corp really gonna want to give up any of their surface parking that they may need in case there's a Black Friday rush at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday?
They already support RV camping.
Yes.
In Walmart.
And the ones I was specifically thinking about here was like Target and Hy-Vee.
Mm-hmm.
That was really the one that popped into my head, where that's kind of, on one side of Fitchburg, I could see people driving, I don't know, I would have to think more about the actual route people are taking, because they'd be coming like out of Madison into Fitchburg and then probably going back into Madison, most likely, but.
Yeah. So I don't want it to come across as saying we should not consider this. I just don't want it to come across as we're going to do this and this is a done, for sure strategy, for the reasons that I outlined.
I will just point out, we did support a park and ride in our comments on the Beltline, as opposed to expanding it. Build a park and ride to allow more people to take transit instead of driving on the Beltline. And definitely Fitchburg benefits from not expanding the Beltline. So, I mean, I get what you're saying about the done, but I just wouldn't want to eliminate, I wouldn't want us to talk about park and rides like there's no benefit to Fitchburg, even if people are coming in, because we all stand to lose if the Beltline's expanded.
Park and ride also can support transit by providing more choice riders.
Right.
Especially if parking policy is synced up with transit policy.
Yeah, let's just put meters on them, and then.
All right, so we got, why don't we change construct to consider?
Yeah.
Is that,
Or we could say based on the study.
Yeah, I
or
can.
something if we're
I
saying we
can
want
do
to
some
study
work
first.
on that,
Yeah.
on those items and kind of reword them.
Yeah, I think that gets at the direction I was going.
So this statement is intended to provide parking for people to ride a bus.
Yes.
As opposed to, because you've been speaking about ride sharing and not about parking somewhere at a bus stop and getting onto a bus at that point. And so which is it, or what are we saying when we're saying park and ride?
I'm much more in favor of park and rides that support transit than where people meet up and carpool from.
I agree, and that also would, add in Elizabeth's goal too, or her comment about the Beltline. I guess, the way when I picture a park and ride, I'm thinking of the ones that are along I-94 in Waukesha County, and then the one in Windsor where maybe there's a state van share, but other than that, there is no transit.
There are ones like on Cottage Grove Road, Madison, that have a big bus stop there that the bus does come to.
I would also be
Those are
concerned.
usually more full, in my
Termination of the BRT line.
anecdotal experience.
Yes. But I also don't see how the transit routes currently would tie into that. I don't want to see us bulldoze Benvenuto's and put up a park and ride in downtown because that's where the B is going to end.
Why don't we just bulldoze McKee Farms Park?
And hey, that solves the problem of why there's so many parking for events. We just don't have events.
All right, let's move on.
Let's see.
Ross did not like, I'm skipping the semicolons.
Yeah.
Ross did not like creating agreements with local business owners, apartment managers to maintain bus stops during the winter.
Yeah, I just think this should be the responsibility of the city. I get that we're trying to, if we can get other people to do this, that would be great, but I would rather have it done correctly and efficiently, rather than waiting on apartment managers who don't even respond to tenants not having heat in their building or something to shovel snow at the bus stop.
Yeah, anybody else mind if we take this out?
Seems more expensive
It's
to
an
figure this
implementation
out.
thing.
Yeah.
Bus stops should be maintained in winter, we know that's, that certainly, if you just remove create agreements up to before maintain, just say maintain bus stops during the winter.
Do we need to say that? Isn't that obvious? Are they not? I mean, is it a goal to maintain bus stop? Aren't they already?
I think we do a decent job, but maybe make something about making bus stops more usable in the winter. That could encompass shelters and heaters and stuff like that.
Or a shovel.
Just sitting there.
Just a shovel sitting there, yeah.
You got 4 minutes? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Bike parking in Terraville. that's,
Communications.
The planning director, so the establish in right-of-way bike parking application. So this is like the Madison program, business on Park Street, like the Mason Lounge, gets a lot of people in the neighborhood who want to bike over there. They fill out an application, the city comes out and installs bike parking in the furniture zone. That's the space between the door zone, where car doors can open, it's got to be clear, and the sidewalk. You put your street signs, sandwich boards, if they're legal, street trees and so on go in the furniture zone. And I wanted to put bike parking in the right of way, and I picked up the bike parking at Saris and took it over there, and our planning director says that she doesn't want it in the right of way for urban design purposes. And I know something about urban design, I'm not a planner, but I wanted to know what that was because the approved plan has the bike parking in the right of way and the concrete has already been poured. So we have to work this out internally within the city. I strongly agree that we have this program. We have a program now which does not have any policy, so it hasn't been implemented, that the city will provide concrete if the adjacent building owner puts in parking. Then the questions of liability and maintenance and stuff like that came up, so I have to write a term sheet so that if they agree to the term sheet, if the city administrator and the planning director, then we can go on and write a policy with those terms.
so I think this is kind of getting off of the plan, like, we're just gonna leave this goal in there, I
Good.
assume. If that's what you're saying.
Yep.
But we have worked out a little bit more of that between Public Works and Planning with
good.
e-cycle stations. So I think if we can talk about that at another time. But,
Very good.
This goal, I think, I'm wondering if we can kind of take this out because we already have it. We've got a work in the right-of-way permit application that we could just change to include bike parking. But I guess since we haven't done that yet, it probably makes just as much sense to leave this goal in there.
Okay.
All of the round trip features. Okay, that's kind of just an expansion on
Expand that
Yeah.
into more expansive. As I say in my comment someplace, can't find my comment. We tell people about the emergency ride home program all the time when we recruit bicycle-friendly businesses, and nobody has ever heard of it. And when I went to Summit Credit Union, said, oh, it was only last week I had to leave work to drive a sick employee home. And this round trip program is funded by federal road dollars. It's an MPO program that covers the whole county. You get 6 cab rides a year. They help organize carpools and van pools. They provide bike buddies and transit buddies and a one-time ride board if your college kid needs to go to lacrosse or something. So it's amazing, and we should be flogging it mercilessly in city media.
So basically what we're saying is we should do this goal. And I agree.
And Steve's already doing the goal.
Yeah. I
We
think-
need
But
more
nobody else
than
is.
just the carpool service.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Logan, your comment is basically about what we're talking about later on the agenda.
It absolutely is.
So I think that's a good goal to share. Maybe we can kind of move past it here and then talk about that later on. I was getting at how do we determine what a major bus stop is, and kind of tracking the goal is like percent of stops with shelters, and Logan, you were saying maybe add other criteria to
Yes.
it.
Yep, so I think of like my bus stop at East Sherrill and Crinkle Route has a large tree that one can seek shelter under or stand on the other side of in the winter. If you were standing in a new development and there's nothing to break the wind and nowhere to take shelter on a kind of rainy day, would that factor in and be something if you're kind of between two and the ridership is kind of close? Do you give it to the one that could use it more environmentally to make it a more pleasant experience?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we can just leave that kind of how it is, because we're kind of talking about the implementation of the goal. So,
Yeah,
benches
my
and
next
trash
comment on the
carts.
same line is,
Yeah.
benches and trash carts are important and way less expensive than shelters, and we should probably measure those and put it in as a goal.
Yep. Agreed. This delete is just, we already talked about deleting the businesses maintaining stops. Bike parking in the right of way. We kind of talked about that. Kinsale Place in Cahill, Maine, same thing. If this study is complete, should this item be removed? Which one is that for, Logan?
Item number 22, determine feasibility of services civic campus and other priority areas.
Okay. Thoughts on that? I know a few people in the room have not probably looked at that study that we did previously. So thoughts on deleting that goal? We've actually done two studies on this, and I tried to do another one but couldn't get anyone to respond to my RFP. So.
And I'll say one kind of preface to this too is it seems as if based on our conversations we've already moved past, is it feasible for us to do this, and we are going to do this. And it seems like it's a top priority on the transit side. So that's another reason why I think we could remove it and say, we've determined it is feasible enough and it is a priority from the elected official side, and it seems like from the folks in this room, current and former.
And I think we can just adapt 21, but just to, instead of demand, we could probably just adapt that to we want transit service to the civic campus that would give us paratransit, which would take care of 21. I feel like we could combine, just be like, we want transit service here, and that's one goal.
Agreed.
And there are no other priority areas in the civic campus, and that's it.
Well, none like that.
It says in other priority areas, and the goal as it was written before, so if we're gonna say that the only priority area is the civic campus, then fine.
Well,
I didn't write it, so. I
think I'm gonna keep our park.
I would say that it is the top priority area that doesn't have transit. So if you look at Hatchery Hill, McKee Farms Park, Orchard Point, those are priority areas, but they have transit. I can't think of another priority area that doesn't have transit that should get it.
Well, I can't think of an independent criteria that determines what a priority area is.
Well, I think the study did do that, like it looked at where people wanted to.
Okay, so the study was beyond just the civic campus.
That was the goal. I mean, as Ross said, we couldn't get anybody to fill out the RFP for the study, but that was.
Another study, and it never got done.
Okay.
And it actually, I believe the study that we attempted to find somebody for combined all of the stuff in here. We threw the park and ride in there, we threw the,
Yeah, it was expanding transit, fixed route, it was park and ride, and it was demand response to the senior center. Were the three things the study was supposed to look at, and nobody would do it for $25,000.
Oh, I see. So we don't have a study.
We do. It's just
an old one.
It's an old study.
This was going to be a redo of that study, basically.
An update.
Yeah.
For me, I think if in 5 years we get transit here, that is golden, and then we can add another priority. Since this is a 5-year plan, and then we can add another priority area.
So maybe we're updating it every year now.
So there you go. Next year we can figure out what we want to, our next priority.
So maybe I'll modify the determine feasibility part and say get service to civic campus and other priority areas.
I think then you can remove number 21.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, why don't you just say civic campus and get rid of other priority areas, since the only thing we seem to agree on is the civic campus.
Agreed.
Hey, recruit.
I mean, we did last time adapt other bus routes, right, to add other priority areas, but I'm fine with that. But I think we added like the new Hartung apartments and considered that a priority when we wanted to reroute.
Okay. This performance measures section, I'm fine leaving it in honestly, but I just didn't really get the point of having it because it just says these are the performance measures when they're spelled out above as well. So I didn't
It's
like
saying that as well as measuring the specific things that are listed up above, these are some overall measures.
Okay.
But I agree that I don't see the value of this. It kind of dilutes the value of the whole study.
Yeah, if they simply reflect what's already listed in the spreadsheet above, and there's, and it's just like, it becomes sort of a pain in making sure that you keep the two consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, so all of this next stuff is deleted, right? But you have the other recommended changes separate, is that it?
Yes, so this next section is like the old recommended transit changes, and then the previous meeting we talked about.
Right, so we're done.
Yes, so we're done with the text. Oh, I see what you mean. I thought our changes were in this document, but they're not. I must have used the.
But we did go over them.
Yeah, I have it in another document.
So maybe next time we can see an overall without so much red line that,
yes.
that
is my goal.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Okay. Then I think there was a comment about D2, so maybe.
Yes, so D2, we have some letters coming in.
Yes.
And I'm going to try to remember some of my questions, but
Before, can you just describe how this works? Like that Metro would change a route completely in Fitchburg, or part of the change completely in Fitchburg without us? Can you describe like
that was
how
my
this
first question.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Before we get into the details, yeah, just.
What is the process of changing routes within Fitchburg, and what is our role?
So in this case, Metro Transit first approached me and said, Verona's changing how the D2 works. I think at that time we were talking about it as the 75. And then we later figured out that Metro later figured out that changing the D2 was the best way to get more service on the 75 route, basically. But basically we looked at a few different options. So Metro knew that they wanted to come back out onto McKee Road and then go down, this is Maple Grove Road here. So that was kind of the main thing that Metro wanted to do, and figuring out how to get there. We went through a few different iterations.
So that stretch north and south on Maple Grove, the D2 currently ends at the north end, and to get over to Verona and have stops along East Verona Avenue, they wanted to end D2 at the south end. And so this blue line is their solution to getting the Fitchburg portion of D2 to end at the south end so that they can extend it, right?
Yes. So the first option that we went through, and this is just me working with Metro staff members, me and other members of Public Works if that was necessary. First option was to go basically use the same route that it does, this red section on Fitcherona, come down Fitcherona, this is the Nesbitt and Fitcherona roundabout, and then turn around in the roundabout and go back north up Fitcherona Road. Basically, that was determined to add too many unnecessary bus hours because you're just doubling up on these stops. Like you're not getting any extra riders from doubling up on those stops because you're going back through less than 5 minutes after you were just there on the other side of the road. Yeah. And obviously, like that wouldn't have really cost Fitchburg any change in bus service because that section of Nesbitt Road that we would be losing service on doesn't have any stops. So that was the first option, where basically nobody loses any service and we just add a bunch of bus hours. But because it added more bus hours and ticked this route over the threshold where we would need to add another bus on it and increase the cost by a much larger factor, that was determined to be infeasible. So the next option was making a U-turn at the Target and Hy-Vee driveway traffic signal, which is somewhere in here. That was technically feasible with the buses. It would have required an additional signal phase to basically stop all other traffic at the intersection to let the bus sweep all the way from the right-hand lane on one side all the way around to the far right-hand lane on the other side. So obviously that's interfering with every direction of traffic. Nobody else can go. It would have required upgrades to the signal in the tune of like $40,000 to $80,000. So that was also determined to be infeasible, and that would have been Metro Transit basically footing that whole bill, because Fitchburg wouldn't participate in it. We're not the ones that are instigating that change. So they didn't want to do that either. So this is kind of what was arrived at as the kind of lesser of several evils, I'll say. So the bus basically comes down, it skips this section on Fitchrona, which does not lose Fitchburg very much service in my mind, because this set of stops here are very close together. Obviously we're getting new apartments in this section here, but it's not a very long walk over to this other stop. And then down here, you know, we're losing this stop at the northeast corner of Fitchrona and McKee, but there's a stop, you know, just across Fitchrona there. Where we do run into issues with losing service is this section down further on Fitchrona, where we have the Point Luxury Apartments, which is right here, and then down on Nesbitt, we've also got, as Steve said, a new apartment development that's going in that is advertised having transit service.
So this would be right here.
Right here, okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Do you agree that going down Maple Grove or whatever it's called is, like you said, Metro wanted to go down Maple Grove. Do you agree that we should prioritize going down Maple Grove?
So I can understand why Metro wants to make this decision. Based on the ridership information they've sent me, there's about 90 riders per day on that section of Maple Grove Road. Those are Madison residents, they're not Fitchburg residents. At these 4 stops on Nesbitt Road, there's an average of 6 riders per day. Those are Fitchburg residents, and some of the people that I attached emails from in the Point Apartments rely on transit because they can't walk very far or can't drive.
They can't walk up the hill.
Right. So the alternate for those people from the Point Apartments is a 10-minute walk up to stop 4200 here, which there's a lot of people in Fitchburg that have a lot longer walk than 10 minutes to a bus stop. But it's tough to take something away that's already there.
And it's a
And it's
significant
seniors,
grade,
right?
yeah.
So the chronology was that you worked this out with Metro planners, and then it became public, and then the letters started to come in.
The letters started coming in before this route was actually finalized, I believe, and definitely before I had the final version of this route. So it was talked about at, basically it was finalized at a Verona meeting that they would be paying for this service, and that's when it kind of went public.
Okay, so There are a couple of interactions here. One of them is that the 75 also follows McKee and Maple Grove, but it is not an all-day route. Fitchburg proposes, if the referendum had passed, to make it an all-day route, but it wouldn't go to Maple Grove. It would loop around Super Target.
And I will say, if we did that, at the time of the referendum that was the case.
Yeah.
Now, I think it would probably do something different because Verona extended this D2 service on the same route that the 75 takes.
So my point was going to be that this north-south section of Maple Grove is also covered by the 75. Of those, however, number of daily riders that you mentioned, how many of them are riding at the peak hours and how many of them are riding, because a lot of those stops are D2 and 75 stops.
I don't have that breakdown.
So alternatives for me would be to run the D2 from the Nesbitt-Fitch-Verona roundabout straight to cross country and serve McKee and Manchester with the 75, and there's a 62 that also serves that area. Some of those stops. So that's one idea. Another idea would be to run it, come out of, I can borrow your mouse here, but turn down Hard Rock the other way, come down here and up, which would be a different loop. Again, it's going to add bus hours. You don't have to do all the cost of the U-turn signal modifications. So I'm concerned that we're building multifamily housing and taking the transit away from it, and I don't want that to happen, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it to not happen.
So any of these options would increase how much Fitchburg pays Metro for transit. So we would need a budget amendment from Common Council.
2/3.
Yes, and
We would need the
I
money.
don't have the costs, we'd have to determine what the new route would be.
So what's the net on this route in terms of budget and to Fitchburg?
This would reduce our hours very slightly. I don't think we have a final estimate from Metro.
Is there some way we could use some of that money to mitigate the situation at all?
It wouldn't. I think we would still need a budget amendment because we would.
Okay,
go
so is this a
over
fait
saving.
accompli?
Right now, yes, unless we have more money from Common Council, basically.
Everyone's head slowly turned to me.
Okay, I think your map's just a little bit not misleading, but it's missing the rest of Nesbitt, which, because you've got these other side streets like Manchester, and so that sort of shows what streets are nearby, and you're missing that part of Nesbitt that shows that Steve said you could go
And Limestone.
and Limestone, that you could come down, you could turn the other way and come down to the roundabout and then go up Fitch-Verona Road.
Yep. So
That doesn't seem to me that would be that many more bus hours because,
Yeah,
and now you're serving 2 hotels.
yeah. It just,
So I can definitely discuss that change with
so you
Metro.
come down Hard Rock and then you turn left and then
So
And
go
you have a
Nesbitt,
stop then right in front of,
that's
and then
Hard
you
Rock.
take the roundabout and then you go up Fitch-Verona and
you see the bullet there for 10 Pin Alley. That senior living apartment complex is going right to the north of
that
that.
seems much more in line with our goals that we just looked at in the transportation transit plan.
So basically, what I'm hearing from this commission is that we'd like to look at alternate routes for the D2 in this area to serve the point and the new development on Nesbitt.
And 2, and in the future, 3 hotels.
Yep.
I don't think we have a stop right now on, by the Staybridge Suites, right? Can you go back to the, well, there's someplace. There it is. There. Yeah, so there's no stop on Hard Rock.
Mm-hmm.
But we would be losing the stops on Fitchburg north of Hard Rock. No, they would still be there because it would go back up that route.
Yeah, they're just served in the other direction.
Right.
It's the same stops.
Yeah.
And I realize this is probably Madison Metro's map and not your map specifically. But should have kept.
That's right. How to lie with maps.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, this is consistent with the other route maps they have on their website. You know, this is trying to show where there is and is not service, where there's never been service on that section of Nesbitt, so.
Ross, I think that your conclusion is correct.
Yeah.
We would like to see more options that would not lose that service and that could even increase service. And if we, that would cost more money, but if it's something that council feels we could afford, we should at least offer them that option because we've got people who are cutting off.
Yep.
So
Oh, go ahead.
how does it work if we say we want to do this and it adds some more time and they, which thing pushes it into needing another bus and who has to pay for it? I mean, couldn't we argue, no, your Maple Grove extension is what causes the extra bus. We just have to pay for the extra quarter mile or whatever.
So we would be splitting the cost of service on the route based on
Municipal boundaries.
the hours on the contract within our municipal boundaries, which if we added another bus, it would increase for both Fitchburg and Verona. So.
Doesn't the cost of the bus go into the big pot to determine the route hour cost
Yes.
for the system?
Yes, we would be adding another bus worth of hours is how I should say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Logan, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna get up and do my teacher. So I just wanna make sure maybe this is what we're getting at with missing Nesbitt. But if we were to come down Hard Rock and then go back onto Nesbitt this way, loop around, is that what we're?
Yes,
Yeah,
basically.
come down to the roundabout and then go up to Fitchburg.
Okay.
So basically, I will go to Public Works, to Tim and to Chad and say, hey, TTC wants to look at other options for this route. I will get direction from administration to do this. And if they tell me no, then I won't. If they tell me to look
And then
into
you'll
it, then I will.
report in your next staff report.
Yes.
And
So-
for our wrath. I want to point out that these 2 stops, this one serves a sidewalk coming from this neighborhood. This one serves a sidewalk coming from Nesbitt. And as I recall, that the ridership was nil.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so these 2 stops could be moved down here and therefore not increase the running time so much of because they're planning to eliminate them anyway.
Mm-hmm. And so basically to just kind of put a button on this, I'm not guaranteeing that any new route would look like what we've talked about here, but I'll do my best with whatever money we think we can get from our budget and work with Metro on it.
Yes, do your darndest.
When it originally came down Nesbitt, at what point does it leave the city of Fitchburg and re-enter the city of Madison or Verona?
Both of those stops are at the point at the roundabout are in Fitchburg because Fitchburg has a little bit of land to the west. There you go.
Okay. So
it's at the roundabout.
So we were not paying for the continuation of Nesbitt. the way that it was before, or is now, I guess.
Correct.
That wasn't
once it
Fitchburg
went-
hours.
Yeah, that's the town of Verona
That's not, yeah,
for a while.
yeah, okay. I didn't know if we could count that as something we're not using and then the miles are somewhere else, but no, it's somebody else's miles. Thank you.
Do we know how long Metro has been thinking about this? I mean, it does seem like it's problematic to approve and support an apartment complex that's excited about being on a transit line and then remove transit. Like, I mean, maybe that's just like, nothing could have been done, it's hindsight, but if Metro knows they're thinking about these things well in advance, it would be good for us to know that, so plan can take that in, and developers can take that into account.
And just to really quickly kind of clarify the language there, as far as I'm aware, we've only adjusted the comp plan for that site. We've not voted anywhere near final on that apartment
So
project.
they could just pull the plug on their development
On the
too.
new one,
Right.
but
Yes.
the one that's already in place
Yes.
is
Yes.
transit.
Yes.
But it's possible a different scenario would happen where we had, right, I mean, and it's unfair to them.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, this is just, that could happen other places in the city in the future, yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It would be really nice to know these things way ahead of time. That, sometimes just isn't the reality of how this kind of stuff works out. Like, this change won't actually happen until August. If that's fairly far in advance for changing a transit route, but anyway.
I would entertain a motion to defer the transportation demand management from large-scale events to our next meeting.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Elizabeth and Rick. Any discussion on the agenda change?
Yes.
Yes.
My concern with that is if we are going to, as we've discussed, talk about the two neighborhood plans, Greenfield and South Stoner Prairie next month, will that leave us enough time for
this?
Yes, will this continue to get
Pushed.
So
Wait.
I think I can, the amount of discussion might change this, but I think I can get through this pretty quickly with a resolution that I think everyone will be in favor of.
Okay, so let's vote it down. All in favor of changing the agenda, say aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
No, okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'll speed through your email, Rick, but basically the gist of it is when we have large-scale event permits, we should make the event advertise the transit routes that go to their event.
Yes.
And we should consider transit when we're permitting these events.
Yes.
So the particular event is Kids Build Wisconsin that kind of kicked this off. It's by far the biggest event that Fitchburg has in any of our parks. They do have an event shuttle. It comes from all these other parking lots down here around Lacey Road and goes up to McKee Farms Park because, as you saw, Rick, the parking is completely annihilated for everywhere around McKee Farms Park. It's something like 10,000 people in the park or something crazy like that.
They're also just parked on the grass everywhere. And
Yes.
Like, it's,
Yeah. Just any.
Can you make $25 on your lawn?
Well, after you mentioned meters, I was thinking, if I just had some meters.
We can pay for transit for this one day.
So almost all of our large-scale events are in McKee Farms Park. Right now, there is no transit service that would viably serve an event in McKee Farms Park because the 75 is peak hour weekday only, and these large events are on weekends.
Yep.
So my thought for this is, right now, there's really very little benefit in making an ordinance change to say that these events need to advertise transit service because there's just not transit service to McKee Farms Park.
Well, they could take the B as far as Cahill, Maine, right?
Yeah, they could.
Yeah.
Their shuttle could come from there too.
Yeah, so, it's not infeasible to think about a weekend route taking you to Cahill, Maine and getting getting off there, and that's, people are parking that far away.
Is that half hour or 15-minute service on weekends? I think it's 15 minutes.
I think it's 15 minutes, yeah.
That's good.
That's a fair point.
And I honestly don't know. I mean, it sort of begs the question of whether, because this is not, the goal says reduce single occupancy vehicles. Almost all of these are families with kids. They're pushing strollers, they're doing all kinds of things. If we don't think that transit is something that that demographic would consider as a way of getting to events like this, then never mind. But if we have a goal of reducing, and that's part of why I changed it to personal vehicles, in Fitchburg, this sort of event is exactly the opposite of that. We are so encouraging single personal vehicles, not single occupancy, to come into Fitchburg in mass over that weekend and other weekends.
I agree, and I'll also say that being on the Public Safety and Human Services committee that approves some of these, I have been asking or asking about what the parking plans are for some of the larger events like this to make sure that it's at least a topic of consideration. I don't know how much, I don't know how much I would want to put a stick versus a carrot at this point, but I think starting with the carrot now is a good idea so that when we get the bee down here, we could say, we've mentioned this to you before, now we have this. Please continue to make this another option.
So that was kind of my thought on this, was once the bee does come down to Triverton Pike, then that seems like a good time to me to require these events to say, hey, and there's also transit service for Madison to here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And could the event, or does Metro have the ability to work with an event organizer to provide vouchers or some kind of, because these people may be people who don't normally ride the bus, and they obviously have lots of personal vehicles. How would they transition into using a bus if maybe that's the one time they use it?
To my knowledge, Metro does not provide vouchers for events like this.
Okay.
Or even extra service.
Right. I mean,
because these guys are renting buses to do this whole parking shuttle thing.
They are.
Yeah, they're not Metro buses.
So I think having it on the flyer that gets handed out to these people, that way they know where to park. Having the transit service, and it also has a little diagram of where the bee goes and where you can get on that, I think would be helpful for first-time riders.
Yeah, okay.
Another thing you could ask them to do is offer a bike corral. We had 70-ish bikes parked in front of the Great Dane on temporary parking, and those are the same racks that the Bike Fed uses for the Badger game bike corrals.
Okay.
They used those and 4 more 11 racks that each held about 10 bikes at the TGIF party for Bike Week last Friday at Brittingham Park. So it's very feasible. The Chamber of Commerce is talking about buying those racks so event organizers could use them. So a bike corral would be a great way to get down to McKee Farms Park without a car.
Okay. I can take those things to some of the staff meetings that we have to look at these large-scale events, and maybe for larger events like this, especially, we can look at some of the stuff like the bike corral and advertising the current B route, and then once it actually comes down here, I think that'll have a lot more weight.
Okay.
So at the very least, you could have B-Cycle bring 100 bikes to Hatchery Hill in a truck, and then pick them all up down at McKee Farms Park. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go to reports from other bodies. Anything transportation related you want to share, Logan?
Let me just really quickly skim back through the agendas. Nothing immediately comes to mind. Other than, let's see, we accepted a salt reduction grant award for snow plowing, which fortunately is not anywhere near where we are in June. I guess I should knock on wood. I don't see anything there. I don't have any notes either, so I can't think of anything else that is transit or transportation related.
Okay, we'll move on then. Do you want to talk about bike and ped, or should I?
All I was gonna say was the main thing that they're working on is the bike and ped plan, right now.
Yeah, they're also working on a September presentation to the Committee of the Whole that we might want to tune into that night. Does everybody know what the Committee of the Whole is? Guys? So that is a fourth Wednesday of each month. The council meets as a committee. The council president presides, and that's the Committee of the Whole. And the Committee of the Whole meetings generally have in-depth discussions of some topic. And for example, I know that coming up this month is financial policies, and what was the other item?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot.
So anyway, so the Bike and Ped plan and what the Bike and Ped Commission has been working on, or those are the kinds of things that they would present. And very similar, we would probably look for a slot to talk about the safety plan when Vision Zero gets going. So that's Committee of the Whole. They talked a bit about their goals that they want into the Bike and Ped plan, and we talked about some of the components of the gold journey. That's the journey to become recognized as a gold bicycle-friendly community, which we're currently silver. And there was some discussion about whether that should be the goal, or is really the goal to do the things that also would be recognized as being goldish. We talked about equity and B-cycles, cycling without age, and some of those other programs. There was some discussion about bike rides and walking tours that the city should organize, such as in the past there's been sustainability bike tours to solar installations. Ag and Rural Affairs and the Historical Society sponsored a Fitchburg Agriculture past and present tour down the Badger State Trail back when there were Fitchburg Days. It was the morning of Saturday of Fitchburg Days. And they were talking about the location of new B-cycle stations. Right now they're targeting Uptown, near the Rusty Bee and the railroad tracks, McKee Farms Park South, because McKee Farms Park is so big, very reasonable to want to ride a B-cycle from one end to the other, but also to serve the neighborhoods and the park facilities on the south end of the park. The Nesbitt hotels, where we were just talking about the D2, there are two today, but they're building a third, Nesbitt and Limestone. And then and the Eagle Jamestown Park, and if you don't know where that is, it's on the border of Madison. This park is actually shared between Fitchburg and Madison, up in the very northwest corner of the city. And as was previously mentioned, they're going to get a draft from the consultant for review at their August meeting. So that's the Bike and Pedestrian Commission report. Anything from Plan Commission? Yeah, well, I guess not. You're not on the Plan Commission, right? Okay, so we will skip that till next time. Future agenda items we have talked about. We have 2 neighborhood plans to review next time. We'll be reviewing it on the last day for comments, so that we can't really say, leave the meeting and say, I'll get back to you. All the comments have to be ready to go to Ross on the 11th. So I would ask commissioners to take such time as you can afford to review those plans well in advance of the meeting, so that we can compile our comments on them, transportation and transit related.
They're on the website now.
They're out there, the drafts those are the referral drafts. Unlike past plans which got referred to all the committees, this is only going to Plan Commission, and so each other committee that wants it on their agenda is not referred to us. We'll allocate time to review it, and our staff person will transmit the comments to the consultants and to the Park Commission. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. What's an example of something we would be looking at and commenting on in a neighborhood plan?
Well, clearly whether it's transit friendly and whether transit is feasible. So both the density and proximity to other routes. We would want to know that there were safe routes to schools, that there were slow streets for neighborhood streets, and that the collector streets and any arterials would have appropriate safety measures, that people could get around on bicycles and walking as well as driving everywhere, those kinds of things. So we're looking for a balanced system.
And these are documents authored by the Plan Commission?
No, these are typically authored by a consultant. And there is generally a steering committee of citizens.
And there's heavy staff involvement, like 7 or 8 2-hour-long meetings with 10 staff members telling the consultant the things we like and don't like about these plans, like public works, planning, housing, economic development.
There were public comment drafts. What do they call them? Blob diagrams, you know, with this will be a single family neighborhood, this will be a commercial center, that kind of stuff. And so those were posted, and there were questionnaires or surveys out for the general public.
This one or this one, blah, blah, yeah.
And so we're looking at South Stoner Prairie and Greenfield. That's what we're looking at.
And I don't want to belabor the point. One thing I'll point out that's different about Greenfield than most other neighborhood plans is Greenfield already exists in a capacity where there's an existing neighborhood of single-family homes that would be essentially, it's kind of the nucleus of the neighborhood plan is blending that old and new. So it may benefit you if you really want to dive into, do a very deep dive, go back and watch the last Greenfield Steering Committee meeting. I think that's a little different because again, there's a sizable population already in this area, whereas like South Stoner Prairie right now, the vast majority of that is a quarry. So balancing some of the challenges and the connectivity there. And there have been a number of choices made about how much connectivity between the existing and the proposed, or the kind of the future vision. So that's something to keep in mind, that there's been a lot of conversations about which streets are through streets and which paths should or shouldn't connect. So that's just a little bit more context.
Generally, people hate change in their neighborhoods, and the city is looking for what's going to go. Our comp plan calls for future urban development south along the South Cheyenne corridor and the railroad line. And so what we're really talking about is how this area will urbanize, and we have to understand and help the existing residents understand that nobody's going to come in and knock down your neighborhood and build uptown in it, but that people should have options. If I live there, my heirs should have the option to consolidate some property and build a big building that might be mixed use, and South Cheyenne Road is going to be an urban section someday. So those are the kinds of things that we don't want to take neighborhoods and pour lucite over them to preserve them forever. We don't want to roll over the existing residents. So they have to be heard, but we have to remember that this is a long-term plan and none of us are going to be here when it's fully realized.
I also think one thing to consider is that development in these areas is likely to happen whether the city has a plan for it or not. And having a plan can help guide that rather than just having each individual parcel develop however it sees fit and can get approved by Plan Commission.
And then the Plan Commission is in the position of jawboning for everything that they want that is good and that will serve the best interests of the whole city, instead of having it all to say, here's what you follow.
And from a transportation and transit lens, that's how you can get some of the neighborhoods where you have a street stub that goes up to a neighborhood line and then it just dead ends. And this is, this is supposed to be a through street, and now it's just a dead end. I think of like the bus stop we were looking at earlier, off of Fitchburg, you've got a street that just kind of goes to the city line and just stops. It was clearly meant to go from Madison into Fitchburg, and now it goes, butts up against, like, there's a tree line and then...
Sandstone Drive.
Yep. Yeah. So that's, from one of the things we'd want to look at from the transportation lens is making sure that some of that connectivity is there, that we're not setting up future TTCs and city councils and et cetera to have to mitigate those things down the road.
That's probably more discussion that we should have for a future agenda item. Anything else that anybody sees on the horizon that we should be thinking about? If you think of something, like if there's a new Route D2 change or something like that, let Ross or I know. And otherwise I will take a motion to, we will meet on July 10th next.
And we also still need to cancel 2 meetings.
Oh, well, won't be next one.
Yeah.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
A motion that we adjourn to July 10th, my parents' anniversary.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Your parents gonna